Good morning, student. Once again. So yesterday I talked about constructor overloading. Today I'll discuss about overloading constructor with area of class objects. Okay. So before that, okay, let me just go back a few pages. We discuss about overloaded class members. We discuss about constructor with default argument, right? Yesterday we discussed about that also. So under the default argument, okay, in this program yesterday I explained this, right? If you remember, here in this program you saw that we have two constructors. One is the default constructor, okay, that is it it accepts no, it declares no parameter, it passes no argument. That is why within the parentheses it is blank, nothing is written, right? And in the case of the second one, you have the parameterized constructor with default arguments, right? So in this case, this constructor is also actually, if this constructor was not there, okay, this would be the default constructor. Why? Because a default constructor, okay, can declare declares no parameter, it passes no arguments, or it can have default arguments. In this case, this is the default argument that has been passed, that has been initialized to this variable, right? So this is a default argument, okay? So in this case, you can see in this program, you can see that two constructors are there, okay? Two constructors are there, and then both can be default constructor, okay? But in a program, there can be only one default constructor, okay? So as there can be only one default constructor in a class, okay, you should not add default arguments to all the arguments of every constructor. So in this case, you have only one default argument given, right? So you should not add default arguments to all the arguments of every constructor, okay? So what will happen is that the compiler will flag an error in that case, okay? Like in this case also, you have two constructors. One is a default constructor, another one is also a default constructor, but since you cannot have two default constructors, so this becomes a parameterized constructor, okay? So what happens is that there is only one object called, so there's only one object declared. So when this object gets declared, in the case of this, it calls only one constructor, right? It can call only one constructor. So which constructor will it call? So that's why you have an error, right? So that error was corrected in constructor overloading, right? That was corrected in constructor overloading, where you saw that, okay, uh, where you saw that in the main function two objects were declared, right? One was emb1, one was emb2, okay? So emb1, emb2. In the case of emb1 that was declared, okay, this, you can see that normal declaration of an object, so which means that the default constructor will be invoked, okay? The default constructor will be invoked, which is this one, okay? And in the default constructor, okay, it has been initialized to default value. That is, in the case of employee code or employee salary, okay, which are like integer types, okay, 0 is the value that has been initialized, okay? And in the case of string or character, okay, null strings has been placed, right? So keep in mind that for a default constructor, okay, uh, when no constructors are invoked, when no constructors are called, okay, by default, okay, the default constructor gets called when the objects gets declared, okay? So in that case, that default constructor does not pass any argument, does not declare any parameters, like in this case, right? So when a default constructor with no parameters, with no arguments are passed, okay, then the default values will be uh, assigned, which like I said, okay, is 0, okay, for integer types or for real types or double types, like that. Or in the case of character or strings, okay, in that case it will be like null strings, okay, null. So that value is assigned, okay, so that okay, no errors will be printed out, Okay, no incorrect information or no garbage values will be printed out like that. Okay, so we'll see that also later on. Okay, so here in the constructor overloading, and you also saw that in constructor overloading. Okay, the word overloading means what? When you are using see, we have already seen function overloading. In the function overloading, the same function name is called again and again, could be reused again and again, provided the parameter types, the parameter names were different, right? And in this constructor overloading, yesterday we saw that, okay, the same constructor, okay, here the default constructor, here the parameterized constructor, okay, the same constructor name is being used. However, what changes? Okay, in the first case, how is it differentiated? You have two objects, so one object calls one constructor, another object calls one constructor, the other constructor, right? So how will it be able to differentiate from one constructor with the other constructor when both the constructors have the same name? Now in function chapter, you saw that the a function with a function with the same name cannot be used twice in a program, right? But you saw that in classes and object and in constructors and destructors, okay, using the concept of overloading, okay, you are able to reuse the same function name again and again, provided, right, the parameter types are different, the numbers of parameters in this case are different, right? So that is what is about what is called as overloading. Okay, here you see, keep in mind that the constructor is also a special member function, just like your normal member function. Okay, so except that the name is same like the class name, okay, and then it has no return type. So here you can see that the constructor, okay, one has no parameters, one has parameters, right? Okay, one has parameters. So that's how the object gets calls the correct constructor. In the first case, it calls the default constructor. In the second case, there is an implicit call to the uh, parameterized constructor. Implicit call to the parameterized constructor means like, okay, the object itself is passing this value, right? So when the object emb2 is passing these values, 100 Miss Sujata, PGD Computer Science, 12,500, okay, it is indirectly calling the constructor. Which constructor? The parameterized constructor. So to initialize the data members, okay, so to initialize the data members, that is employee code, employee name, employee designation, employee salary, okay, like that. So so you saw that in constructor overloading, okay, the same constructor can be the same constructor or the same member function could with the same name could be used again or could be called again and again, provided the number of parameters differ, right? Okay, so that is what you saw here. Okay, and in the previous one also, overloading of class member functions, also you saw the same thing, right? In the class member functions also you saw that, okay, the arguments that were passed in the first case, four arguments were passed by the member function, okay, through the object access the member function xemb, object access the member function emb over to pass these values, to pass these arguments, 100 Miss Sujata, PGD Computer, 12,500, right? And these values was passed to the parameterized constructor, which had four parameters declared, right? That was class method 1, that was class method 1. So these values get passed here, right? In the second case, when this value 101 Mr. Raman PGD maths, okay, was passed, so this emp over, this is the calling function, this calling function, uh, this is an implicit call, right? This calling function implicitly pass the values to the second class method, that is this one, right? That is this one. So in here you can see that e code gets transferred to employee code, okay, that is e name gets transferred to employee name, e designation gets transferred to employee designation. But what about the salary? Mr. Raman's salary was not passed here, was not defined here, right? So we do not know about what is Mr. Raman's salary, right? So how do we get in the output 12,500? Because in the case of the member function, right? Okay, the in the case of the member function, okay, when the object gets declared, two or more objects, okay, provided they belong to the same class, any objects belong to the same class can access the same member function, because the member function is allocated only one memory space. Okay, so the member function is common for all the objects. In the case of the data members, if two objects are declared here, suppose like xemb and emb1, okay, the data members, for though they may be accessing the same data members, okay, over and over again, okay, yet the memory location for the data members of the two objects will be different, because the two objects represents two different data, okay, or let's say two different employees, right? So the employee data member of one and employee data member of the other, the data will be differ, the data will differ, right? So that's why the memory location also will be different, where they stored will be different. Okay, so in the case of here, the same object is accessing, right? So in the case of this data employee salary, it still retains the previous value, that is 12,500. That memory space was not vacated, right? And so it still retains the previous value, that is 12,500. So that's why it is being displayed 12,500. You got it? Okay, now in the third case, okay, only two arguments are passed, 102 and Miss Rekha. Okay, so it calls the third class method, and then that value gets passed. So when you see in the output, okay, pgd match and 12,500, right? So there the string value pgd match also gets displayed, okay, because it retains that previous value. Okay, so in a class overloading, or even in overloading of class member functions, okay, the previous values get retained, okay, and it gets displayed. Okay, but now you will see that in overloading constructor with array of class objects, okay, so you can see that the class member functions can also be overloaded, the constructors can also be overloaded. Okay, so when we have the combination of both or one of it, okay, with class area of class objects, now we have already seen this area of class objects, this term, in the previous chapter, that is classes and object, right? So if you see all the programs, okay, if you turn the page one after the other, okay, you will see that all the programs are almost same, except that with every topic there are some slight changes. So if you concentrate well enough, you will understand every topic point page by page. Okay, and if you compare these programs with the previous chapter, that is classes and object, okay, you will see that it is very much similar, except that in classes and object you use your normal member function along with the private public protected access specifier, and in here you're using a different member function called as constructors. However, the concept is quite same. There you use overloading, here also you're using overloading. There you use object pass as function arguments, okay, there you declared arrays, here also you are declaring arrays, here you also declare here also objects were passed as function arguments. There you had array of class object in the classes and object, right? Here also you have area of class objects, right? So you can see that the classes and object, understanding class and object is very important. So those of you who have are much familiar with classes and object will find understanding this program much easier. Okay, so I won't be explaining all of it, because all these are same, mere repetition of the previous programs. Okay, but if you see in under the public access specifier, the member functions declared, okay, you have four constructors declared, four constructors prototype declared here. First one is the default constructor, so the constructor name is same like the class name. So the first one is the default constructor, that is under the how do we know it is the default constructor? Because no parameters are declared, right? No arguments are passed here. Okay, so second one, you have parameterized constructor with four parameters declared here, with four okay. So the third one also, you have parameterized constructor with three parameters declared. So three formal parameters. and you have the fourth constructor, parameterized constructor with two parameters declared, right? So you can see that the function name is same. Now, like I said, it is not possible for the same function name to be reused again and again, right? But it is possible through the concept, through the method of overloading. So that is what overloading is all about. Okay, so how, but if you observe all of these functions, constructor function, okay, you will see that it differs. These three, okay, you can see that one declares 4 parameters, another declares 3 parameters, another declares 2 parameters. So it is not equal. Though the parameter type may be same, though the parameter name may be same, equal, ename, okay, yet the number of parameters that are used are different, right? So that what prevents error mismatch, okay? So that's why the compiler does not flag an error, okay? Now, if suppose all of these constructors were declared in the same way, then in that case, error will be pronounced. Okay, the compiler will display error. So you can see that that is how overloading of constructor can be done. Okay, but yes, so the function definitions are in here. Okay, all same, just like the previous one. But now come back to the main function. Okay, here you can see that the difference is here. The objects gets declared as an array. So you have the object that is emb normally declared as an array. So now this is an array which will create 4 array elements, that is emb1, emb0, emb1, emb2, emb3, like that, right? Okay, so for that, as if you are familiar with the concept of array, how do you initialize an array? When you initialize an array, you use the assignment equal to operator, right? Okay, assignment operator, and then within the curly brackets you assign the values to the array elements, right? Okay, you assign the value to the array elements, like that. So similarly, okay, the data can be assigned to the objects implicitly or explicitly. We have seen implicit way of passing the values, we have seen explicit way of passing the values also, right? So in the same case, even though the object has been declared as an array, yet the passing of the values will be same way, okay, implicitly or explicitly. But in this case, the only thing, to not get confused, okay, do not get confused, just because here 4 is written here, that's why 4 4 values or 4 constructors are passed here. Okay, so in this case we have 4 calling functions. Okay, if suppose, okay, if suppose it was like this, employee emb, and this subscript was not there, right? In that case, if you had an explicit call, it would be like employee 100, Miss Sujata, PGD computer 12,500, and this curly brace, instead of this these curly braces will not be there, right? So it will look very much like either this is an implicit call, okay, so it will look very much like an explicit call, okay. What is that? Yeah, assigning, okay, assigning using the assignment operator, okay. So like that, but like I said, okay, not to get confused, because this object has been declared as an array, right? So 4 array elements or 4 objects, right? So in that case, while assigning the values to these 4 array elements, okay, you have 4 data to be passed, right? Okay, so that's why 4 constructors are declared here, okay, 4 constructors are declared here. So for every object, one constructor is passed, okay. For object emb0, this constructor gets passed. For object emb1, this constructor, like that, okay. So do not get confused by this part, okay, because we have declared 4 array elements, okay, that's why 4 constructors are called. Or so in the first case, the calling function, keep in mind that this is the constructor which is the member function, right? So the calling function passes no argument, right? The calling function passes no argument. So that's why what happened is that here under the call function, okay, the call function, this one, this gets invoked and the default values gets assigned. So EMB code 0, okay, EMB name null string, EMB designation null string, EMB salary 0. Okay, so this is the default value. Okay, now why is this default value needed? Okay, now for the main purpose of the constructor is to ensure that the objects gets initialized. Okay, every object here, 4 objects are declared, so that's why the first object is the default constructor value, which is 0 null. So that particular object data members gets initialized correctly. Now when I say about gets initialized correctly means what? No garbage values are passed, right? Now if suppose the first employee data was suppose like employee code is 0, employee name, instead of null string, if suppose a garbage random name gets printed out, then it will result in error, right? Wrong information being printed out. Or if suppose employee salary, a garbage value gets passed, then that will result in wrong information getting printed out or being stored, right? So for that purpose, constructor assigns the default value. I hope you understood now. Okay, so same way in the second case, this is the calling function. Okay, this is the function name and these are the arguments that are passed. So this is your calling function, right? So in this case, all these are explicit calls. Okay, this is your calling function and yet this is explicitly calling the what, the parameterized constructor in this case. Okay, so after that, that value gets passed to the object, gets stored using the assignment operator. So in the second case, the parameterized constructor gets called. Which parameterized constructor? There are 3 parameterized constructor. That parameterized constructor gets called which has 4 parameters or 4 variables to accept these 4 values. Okay, so that's why the class method 1 gets called. Okay, and then it displays stores all the 4 values. And in the third case, 3 values get passed: 101 Raman, PGD Maths. Okay, so in here class method 2, okay, you can see that 101 e code that gets stored under employee code, e name gets passed through string copy to emb name, so Raman also gets stored. E designation, so that is PGD Maths, right? That also gets stored. But here one parameter, one argument is missing, that is the 12,500, that is the salary. Now the salary of Raman may be different from Miss Sujata. Miss Sujata is 12,500, but Raman may not retain 12,500. But if you remember in the previous uh, in here, okay, the when the salary was not mentioned, okay, the member function passed that previous value only 12,500 because that memory space was not vacated, right? Okay, but in terms of a constructor, it cannot be like that. It cannot provide a garbage value or random value like that. Okay, so in terms of in terms of constructor, parameterized constructor, here only 3 values were passed, that is 101 Mr. Raman and PGD Maths. The salary was not passed, right? So what happened was that here if you see uh, under the class method 2, right, that salary got assigned in the constructor body itself. Instead of 12,500, 0 was passed to the EMB salary. Default value was passed to the EMB salary. Okay, so that 0 gets printed out in your output here. Okay, 101 Raman, PGD Maths and 0. Okay, so I hope you understand from there. Now in the fourth constructor, in the fourth calling function, 102 and Miss Rekha, only those 2 arguments are passed. So what happened is that in the third class method, okay, uh, e code transfers to employee code, e name transfers to emb name, and then also emb salary is assigned the value 0, so default value 0. Okay, so that value gets printed out here. But for employee designation, if you see the output, it is null, right? Why? Because if you see the argument that were passed, only 2 arguments were passed, and in the in the last function body, employee salary was assigned the value 0, but employee designation was not written here. Neither was it passed as an argument, nor was assigned in the function body, right? So what happens, as per the previous program, okay, it will print out pgt maths. Okay, it will print out pgd maths, but in terms of constructor it will not print out pgd maths because no values was assigned. It will that's why null value gets printed out. The employee designation gets is null, so that, okay, no random error string value gets printed out. So because Miss Rekha, if may not be a PGD maths teacher, right? She may not be a PGD computer teacher. Okay, so since that value was not passed, okay, so that value, the constructor ensures that the default value, that is the null value, gets displayed. Okay, so using the constructor you can see that, okay, error mismatch is minimized. Okay, finding the best match solution is done. Okay, so yes, so that will be for today. Okay, I hope you have understood from that explanation. If you have any problem or on any part, okay, you can message me or you can call me. Okay, so that will be for today. Okay.